It's time for another Behind the Shot image critique show, this one number 14. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Behind the Shot YouTube channel. I'm Steve Brazill, the host of what is normally a podcast, but this type of show we do a little bit differently, and that is the image critique shows here on Behind the Shot. We're doing one a month right now, and I do them with my co-host that I will bring on here in just a second. But I do want to remind you, if you do like what you're seeing today, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. It would be much, much appreciated. Click the thumbs up, drop a review in your podcast feed, whatever it is. Hit the bell. The strangest thing about YouTube is you can subscribe and not know when I do something unless you hit the bell. So make sure that you hit the bell. These critique shows are not in the normal podcast feed. They are only here on the Behind the Shot YouTube channel. So make sure you stop by frequently and see what we're doing. And that brings us up to, as I said, my co-host for today, Mr. Don Komarechka. Don, how are you?
Hello, sir. I am doing well. I mean, I've had a bit of an issue. I occasionally, I don't know, Steve, if you ever get migraines, but they really just knock you off your feet. And they show up around the holidays because just everything is so chaotic. So thankfully, today's a migraine-free day. I don't have to sit in the dark for 4 hours.
That would be a good band name, Migraine-Free Day. I just think I can see the greatest hits. Our guest today, Mr. Chris Niccolls of DP Review TV. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Steve. No headaches. I don't have to sit in the dark either. I'm happy. A little festive behind me, and yeah, I'm doing good. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, you're set for the holidays. And I'm going to tell you early what I told your cohort who's been on the critique shows 2 episodes ago, Jordan Drake. And that is, for those of you out there that don't subscribe to DP Review TV on YouTube or go by the DP Review website, please, you really should. I firmly believe, I'm not saying this because Chris is sitting in front of me, and it's the first time I've met Chris face-to-face, although I've followed him for a long time because I'm a fan of DP Review TV. DP Review TV, I still believe, is hands down the best overall coverage of photography and video topics. The deep dives you guys do, and more importantly, the way you guys explain it with humor.
You're going to make Chris blush.
I appreciate that, Steve. Yeah.
No. Canadians don't blush.
Yeah, no, I mean, we really appreciate it. We don't do the ads. We don't do the mid-roll stuff, right? We really are depending on subscribers to the channel just so that, our higher ups know that people are watching, they're enjoying the show, and we're just delivering that content and that journalistic intent that we're always trying to bring, as well as humor. Like you said, we try to keep it entertaining as much as possible. Our last best and worst video, I think, was one of our more entertaining ones in recent memory. So yeah, please join us. We really appreciate that.
Actually, the latest one that you did remind me of the Bob and Doug McKenzie type thing.
Well, there you go.
Because you're both sitting there with Tucson. So that brings us up to the show. This is the critique show. If you want to get in, if you're watching this after the fact, which is absolutely fine. We do stream these live. But if you want to get in on this after the fact, the shows stay up here on YouTube. You can watch them at any time. But if you want to participate in this, fairly simple to do. All you got to do is, first of all, go over to Flickr. Make sure that you sign up for a Flickr account. It can be the free account. But they're owned by SmugMug, and they're a good company. You couldn't say that about Flickr a couple years ago. Now that they're owned by SmugMug, I really, really like Flickr, and sign up for a paid account if you want to. But here's the deal. Once you are in with an account, whether it be paid or free, join the Behind the Shot group on Flickr and submit your images. At that point, all you're really doing is playing in the pool, right? Share your images. It's a community. We all have fun over there. That's great. I don't want to critique somebody's image unless you give explicit permission that, yes, I would like to hear your comments on this, right? So to do that, the way you give permission is use a Flickr tag, not a hashtag, but a Flickr tag, btscritique. We search for that in the group pool, and we randomly pull 9 images per month to critique, and that's the easiest way for you to get in on it. And that's going to bring us up to getting started for today. Now, Chris, I should have told you this in the emails, and I didn't.
Uh-oh.
I think I surprised Jordan too. The standard process that Don and I use is, you're our guest, you're our esteemed guest. We welcome you with such warm arms. So you get to go first on the first image. The first image is the long view.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to do it because there's a lot going on here. And I just want to say, I normally teach at SAIT, which is a technical college here in Calgary. And of course, with all the stuff going on right now, I haven't been able to teach now for this year. So I actually really enjoy this. I like giving people feedback, being constructive. And there's a lot going on I think is very strong with this image, and some stuff which I think we could improve. But I love doing waterfalls. This is actually something that we have quite a lot of in Alberta. The first thing I'm going to say here that I like about Drake's photo, I like the use of the lens that he's got here. It does give it that sort of three-dimensionality. So we get a lot of movement, the eye coming down, the back waterfall really catches my eye, and then it just draws me down. I do feel, though, that because that's so strong, I wish that we had maybe a vertical frame. That would be probably my first suggestion here. We got a lot going on the right. We got a lot going on the left. And I feel like a vertical frame, tighter crop is always a good thing to try to get that eye drawing down. The other thing that's tough, I love the light. I think he caught good light. Anytime anybody's done these, and Don, I know you've probably taken a couple stabs, and Steve, you have too, at long exposure waterfalls. It's so tough when you've got a little bit of wind, hey, and it just gives you that shake in the leaves, and I always find that distracting. I don't know if Drake felt that too, but yeah, you've got that good clump of fern foliage there, and it does draw the eye, I find.
Don, what do you got? And by the way, I have tried this. I suck at landscape photography. Let me just get out there now. Don, what do you got?
Yeah, the ferns or whatever greenery is off on the side, having that bit of a motion blur, that's a problem, but not one that can't be overcome. This is a great example of where you can composite two images together, where you can do one as a long exposure and, what was it, a 1 second exposure at f14, ISO 100. You can easily bring those settings more into an alignment at the same exposure of being, say, like f8 and ISO 400 or so, that has a much faster shutter speed to stop the motion blur from that second image and paint it in. Right? I mean, I don't think that that's bending reality too much. You're just stopping the wind from blowing on those effectively by using different camera techniques. Now, a 1 second exposure for waterfalls, I think, is great. For a lot of the heavier motion areas, it really smooths things out, gets a nice silky cascade. It doesn't do quite enough for me at the pools of frothy foam on the bottom, which I like, but they're still too recognizable. I would really like if this exposure was from 1 second to, say, maybe 10 seconds. I know that seems like a bit of a jump, but with heavy neutral density filters, that's a fairly easy thing to do to really make it look like a hurricane kind of swirling around on the bottom of that, and just remove any sense of identifiability of it. And yeah, that's going to blur stuff around on the other sides of the frame, but we've already talked about the technique, how you can kind of combine that stuff together.
So I'm not going to have much to say now because they kind of took my thunder. First of all, I will say, for the 1 second thing, that to me actually does matter. There's a number of ways that you could have fixed that, but using that EXIF data, I am going to say this is a 15 millimeter shot, and you do have lens correction applied to this, which is great. I would have rather not seen some crazy bowed 15 millimeter shot. To me, there's multiple shots in here, but the real shot to me, kind of like Chris said with go vertical, the real shot to me here is the upper left portion of the image. So I don't think I love the color at the bottom and I love the waterfall at the top. Those swirls to me at the bottom, because they're not long enough, actually kind of bother me. They stand out way too much. It's a different kind of blur. It's a different kind of white. I would crop up just to the top of those swirls. I would crop from the right just past the first big thick tree that's leaning to the right a little bit. That would put the top waterfall on a rule of thirds. You'd still see it coming down to a second left rule of thirds, leaving the frame at the bottom. That would get you some really nice compositional structure to me. And this one's going to be weird. I don't know if anybody else agrees on this. Look, these trees are at an angle. There is no level per se, but there's something about this shot that feels like it's tilting left unnaturally. And I would actually, that first plateau, which is probably a small pool up there, I'd level that and let the trees be whatever angles they are. And I just think it would feel more comfortable. But I don't know, maybe that's...
I agree. This is the kind of image that you can dive into with the warp tool or the liquefy tool to just readjust certain parts of the image to make it feel more balanced in a horizon line when there is no horizon line.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I got to ask now because you opened the door. What would you warp or liquefy on this?
The trees. So the trees.
Would you straighten them?
Or maybe make the one directly on the left and the right of the stream bow in a little bit more, Which, yes, I'm bending reality, but they would do that if you were tilting the camera on a wide-angle lens a little bit further down anyhow, right? I mean, you're bending reality one way or the other. Or to adjust the left-hand side in the upper corner, it has a kind of a vague diagonal line that's cutting across the frame, and we don't quite see the same connection on the other side. And so if there's any way to just disrupt that line from being straight by making it bowed one way or the other, would avoid us from seeing any horizon issues perceived.
I like that idea. And I will say, Drake, I love your color treatment here. It's so real. I feel like I'm standing there. And in many ways, I guess that's one of the biggest compliments that you can give to a landscape photographer, is that it feels like you are standing at the bottom of this pool of water. So congratulations on that one. All right, next image. This one is going to be Dawn going first, and it's Indy black and white.
Well, I love the eye connection here. That just draws me right into this image immediately. Where and the fact that you have one eye that's obscured by the hair, I think, is perfectly fine in this case. I don't think that that's a huge distraction. And so the hair flowing all around that one half of the face, I think, is a great capture and a great moment. And there's an expressiveness of it just being candid, right? Like, it's not posed, it's not staged in any way, which I find valuable for this kind of moment to be captured. Now, it's interesting, though, the choice of black and white could both work and hurt you in this case, because I know just by the subject matter, there's color in the frame. That's a life preserver in the background, right? And so you know those to be a bright color, like orange or red or something like that. And the plaid or checker pattern shirt probably isn't monochromatic either. And so those two things I'm battling with, because in my mind's eye, I'm painting color into the image because it's absent in the frame, rather than usually I find a good black and white to be... subtracting the color simplifies the composition and actually makes it more helpful. In this case, I might actually say, give me the color. Just give this the level of vibrancy around it. I won't have the same strong connection to the eyes, so there's a caveat there. But I do believe that my brain is just trying to put color in this image after it's been taken away.
Interesting. All right, so I'm going to go second on this one, and I'm going to agree with you on some stuff and not. And one of the reasons when I saw this image in the pool and I picked it, I thought, I've got people on that have kids, so it will be younger kids, and so it will be interesting to see how they critique, because based on reading the description, I believe this is the photographer's daughter. And I love, like Dawn said, the eye contact. The fact that the second eye is obstructed by hair does not bother me at all, and in fact, the fact that I can see a sliver of darkness actually in many ways adds. If the eye was completely covered, I wouldn't like it as much, but I can see some of the iris back in there. I like the black and white treatment, and I love that this is a candid, unscripted moment of a photographer's child. And if this was a client's child, I think that they would vote for this by paying you for the photo. But the black and white thing I want to touch on, because when Don said he sees that preserver as probably being orange or something like that, I wonder if that's why they went black and white, because bright orange life preserver, big behind this young child, I think would be a distracting color, right? I think regardless of the colors of her shirt, I think that is just going to draw your eye and pull you out of the subject of the shot and draw too much attention unless you really burned it down. So I think that's maybe why, but in doing the framing is where I have an issue. And that is that preserver is round, but the left side of the hole inside the life preserver is bigger left of that pole. I wish her head was in that clean spot. If you had literally just stepped one step to the right, you wouldn't have the pole coming out of the top of her head. And I think that would just be a more attractive and beneficial thing to elevate, this shot to the next level. The only other thing I would say, two things actually, is one, I wish you were at her eye level. Shooting down on children to me is not as effective as getting down to their eye level. And last but not least, her eyes aren't sharp. It's her sleeve that's sharp. And I don't know if you focused on her eye and your camera is front focusing, not sure, but you might want to go back and look where your focus point was, try and figure out how you shot this and see if either you're having a focus issue, and you can micro adjust that hopefully with your camera, and or you missed focus, which may be why this was a high shutter speed too. This was 500th of a second.
And it's a weird lens, Steve. I don't. It must be an old one. An EF 38 to 76 millimeter.
Yeah.
F4.5 to 5.6.
Oh, maybe that's an old film lens.
Yeah, from the late 80s or something, when the EOS product cycle was just gearing up, and that might affect the quality there as well.
Yeah. All right. What do you got, Chris?
Well, I agree with what you guys are saying to some degree. First off, the lens, there can be an interesting character. I feel like if you're going to have a lens that has an interesting character, maybe softens things a little bit. Portraits, and especially kids' portraits, that's one place where you can get away with it. I think that the photographer's gotten so close here on a lot of stuff. I do agree that I like using framing. I think that round object is a great way to bring the eye right to the story, which is this little girl's face. She's beautiful, nice light on the skin, draws attention to the eye. So I'm going to disagree with Don. I'm all for the black and white. You can have some pretty
2-1, we win.
You can have some pretty crazy colors going on with kids' clothes. It's very rare when someone gets lucky enough that things are coordinated properly with kids' clothes, or they do it on purpose. And sometimes, it's great for Christmas card photos and family photos. Sometimes a little bit too much when you're going for that candid look. So I think black and white here is a great way to bring it down to the tones, the softness of the shading on the face. I do agree that if you had all the options to go a little bit to the right and a little bit down lower, you cannot emphasize enough, especially to photographers who are trying to really hone their craft, how much a couple inches of movement down, left, right, does drastic things to your background. Get that post a bit to the right, get that framing a little bit more obvious. But I still think that round shape frames the face. I think the composition draws your attention to the face, getting a little bit lower, but at least the photographer's not standing up and shooting right down onto her and just getting a whole bunch of ground. So it's close, not quite there. I focus only because I shoot for DP review. Man, do I get critiqued all the time if there's anything even technically wrong. Eyes and focus are key, but I don't mind a little bit of softness and character from an older lens. I think that can work quite well for a portrait.
And one final thing on here, Steve, that
ahead.
I didn't notice at first, but now I notice it, and I love it. The diagonal lines on the life preserver in the background cut right through her eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It connects right across the frame. And now that I see that, it's just a really wonderful line in the composition that.
And they mirror the light on the ground. Same angle as the light beam that's on the ground too. And I will say, I like the softness. Okay, in a portrait, the key is the eyes. You want the eyes sharp. I get all of that. Yeah. And I do believe that if the image was soft. But this isn't soft to me. This is missed focus because the sleeve is tack sharp, right? Yeah. I can see the wrinkles in the sleeve. And Terrell is here. Terrell, nice to have you. And Terrell says, I think it's tough compositionally for this shot. You try to reframe it, like I said, which is moving her to the frame left. That would put her on a rule of third, not dead center too, by the way. And then she's walking into the pole, which, yeah, I can see that. Candids with kids obviously are luck, no matter what
you take what you can get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The bottom line is it's their daughter. They're probably loving this. All right, so I'll go for the next one. And this one, first of all, titles matter. And I like the title on this. It's Clue, the musician with the fiddle in the music room, which is obviously a homage to the game Clue, which I haven't played in a long time. I need to pull that one back out again. So a couple of things, and I'm going to go deep on this one. And I normally don't go this deep, and I hope I leave stuff for you guys, but I've got so many thoughts when I saw this one because, first of all, this room for portraits, what a find, right? This is the scene to do a shot like this where you're talking about music. You've got the piano, which almost looks more like a harpsichord. You've got the open player on the left. I just love what you've got staging this room. The cabinet on the right, the thing on the left being open, the position of things on the table. You clearly thought about and staged this. Except, when I say the things on the table, on the left side of the table is an actual speed light pointing up at the ceiling. And I can see the flash against the wall heater. So if you're going to do that, make sure to then clone it out afterwards. Take a plate, an empty plate without the flash there, put your flash in, do your bounce shot to hit some light, and then make sure that you use that plate to remove the flash down the road. Staying on lighting. The window light on him, I love the idea, but generally if you're going to do that, same thing, take a plate with that window properly exposed, substitute that out in post, because if you leave it in, it's super distracting. I would crop that window out if you're going to leave it like this. It's just too bright. In fact, the combination of it and the flash, which is going off, the combination is clipping the side of his face. And in a portrait, my assumption is on a staged portrait like this, you've got complete control of the lighting. So clipping somebody's face, just not going to work. So let's talk composition for a second. In the upper left, on the left side, there's a bookcase cut in half, and there's a little piece of leaf coming in. Watch your edges. Think about what you're cropping. Like, I don't mind the picture being cropped, but the vase on the right, you lost a little of the vase, right? And there's no reason for that. I would keep the whole vase in there. And posing, the left, his right arm, camera left, I don't mind the way he's holding the violin, the fiddle. The right arm looks too stiff. Put a little bend in the arm, right? And the only reason I'm going this deep is I think there's so much potential here. The maker of this image is really on to something and has some skill. Take it up to the next level. Last thing is just clean up stuff. The image is not level it, and the mirror is dirty, clean it. Those things, which are all very manageable, I think would take this image hugely to the next level. Did I leave anything for you, Chris?
Yeah, I like the concept that you were saying of maybe tightening the crop a little bit. I love that the mirror reflection, everything that you see in the mirror is still totally cohesive with the image. And it's a good point that you make.
And by the way, the mirror image is showing stuff that's not in the scene.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Which I like.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of people do try this game of trying to hide flashes, and it's amazing how many times in a portrait like this, especially an environmental portrait, you've got a photographer with a light stand, big octabox on a flash, pointed right at the subject, giving beautiful light. And like you say, you take a second frame and you just make it disappear. And you can really get a lot of traction that way. But what I do like about this photo, we talk about this quite a bit in my classes, simplicity is one of the first things that people really want to focus on in photography and trying to make more compelling stories. And you've got a scene like this where you have a lot going on. And at first thought, you might say, oh, it's not very simple. It's very complicated. It certainly has a lot of energy. The eye moves all over the frame. But I like that it's unified simplicity, which means that everything in there goes well. I like that the color of his shirt goes along with pretty much the only other color in the scene, that glass, structure. And so it's cohesive, it's simple. And I think that's why even looking at this image, despite the technical flaws, it has a calm mood and it has an accessible kind of feel, and it draws you into a time period. None of this really looks out of place. So I like the idea of cleaning things up, like you said, Steve, but certainly the intent of having a feel, a mood, and a concept, I think are very strong here for sure.
I completely agree. And by the way, I've seen it where people have that C-stand with a giant softbox, and you don't see it in any shot, but you'll see it in the reflection in the mirror. So
right, sure.
Things happen. Don, what do you got?
You could have just pulled the back chair on the table out a little bit and put the flash on the chair. Its angle wouldn't have been terribly obstructed, and its distance from the ceiling wouldn't have been that much of a change either. So there are certain things that, Steve, you were right, that you can clone it out, but you could probably hide it in different ways as well. And you guys have talked this one pretty well to completion, but the idea of this image, the details, the tiniest details, the image to me would be complete if all of those were just given a bit of extra polish. Like there's a book that's also green on the right hand side of the frame. It doesn't need to be there. In fact, it's so green it's brighter green than the guy's shirt. And so it's pulling my attention to it when it doesn't really serve any context. And even, that centerpiece is just, it's too cool, like too vibrant, and it fits, but it doesn't. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what era it's from, but I'm assuming this is a whole period room. It is competing as an actor in the frame with the green shirt, and I wanted to be accenting it and not competing with it, and I don't know if you can just play with the colors a little bit. I'm surprised nobody mentioned the folded pieces of paper on the chairs. I don't know why they're there. on the two chairs that we can see, there are two folded pieces of papers in V's, and the one right center bottom, if you zoom in on that, it is actually darker on the top and lighter around the rim, which shows an editing mark, which means that the photographer that when editing this was doing a lot of dodging and burning in order to guide our eyes around the frame, and it's great that I know that that attention to detail has been given. It's not so great that I can see it. Because there's no way that that paper would have naturally been that gradient that somebody using a dodge or burn or whatever kind of tool to that end. And finally, a polarizing filter removes reflections off of non-metallic surfaces. And so you've got such a bright reflection off of the table in one area, it's overexposed, and on the record player or whatever it is, off on the backside as well. Those reflections can be toned down by putting a polarizing filter on the camera, which might also have some impact on some other subtle textures, like the cabinet at the very back, where the reflections are turning into a distracting texture as well.
I've got to add one more thing, and again, to the photographer of this, the only reason I'm so focused on this is you're good. You've got a great concept here. You chose a great room. The model look is fantastic. Like Chris said, everything being color coordinated is awesome. But I'm thinking of this lighting. You could have exposed this room for the window, kept the window in without clipping it, taken that same flash, bounced it off of the ceiling from more towards the camera on a stand, and probably gotten a really nice shot out of just doing that with just that fill light. You never know. The last thing is the watermark, and this is obviously subjective. I understand you may always put it in the center, but I would argue putting it against the chair is not as effective as if you were to just move it to the right and put it on each photo in a unique open spot like the carpet. That's just obviously personal taste at that point, but something to think about. Next one up is Quiller book Still Life. And Chris, you want to start us on this one?
I'd like to start on this one. I think right off the bat, the thing that's going to grab so strongly is the mood that this photographer is trying to capture. I think that was done very well. I look at this, and obviously you've got the old school pistol, you've got the whiskey / bourbon, you've got the sort of pulp fiction novel. It all lends itself to that kind of film noir, early detective kind of story. Although we do get a nice twin lens reflex in there too. That's a nice nod, The gobo in the background, I get what they're trying to do. I don't know. There's something about the shapes of the buildings which kind of make me feel like anytime I see this kind of thing, I'm thinking like New York City kind of stuff. And I don't feel like the buildings match that. It almost looks more like a Dubai or a Moroccan kind of market or something. I don't know. I kind of get the reminiscent, and it's a little in focus. But it's clever. I mean, I see that they're trying to build that sort of scenario. I like the dark corners. I like the sort of spotlight kind of look. I feel like the camera could be a little bit more open-faced to the rest of the scene. But again, simple, unified colors. I think the mood is strong here. It's kind of like the other shot that we just looked at. Anytime that you're building a scene, almost like a painting, this is where you have to be so critical about making sure that tiny details are really taken care of. Because if you miss them, which is easy to do with a lot going on, people are going to pick up on it. And anything which, when you try to build such a strong mood, especially something that's more reminiscent of a time period, everything's got to be solid because people are going to see any faults like a hawk.
Don, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with what Chris said. In the comments or the description for the picture, it does say, favorite book number 2, The Quiller Memorandum, spy thriller set in Berlin, hence the skyline. Now, if that's a Berlin skyline, I don't identify it as such, but I've only been to Berlin once over a decade ago, and so it's not going to stick in my memory based on what I'm seeing here. But that skyline is also, to me, the one point of tying it together, but also a point of weakness in the frame, because it seems like it is displaced. Right around the window frame, it's brighter. The buildings are brighter right around that cross point in the image, and I'm not sure why. But they're also slightly out of focus. However, they're more in focus in the reflection in the bottle and in the reflection on the surface of the whiskey than they are in the background. And so, again, it's okay if you composited this together and those aren't actually the buildings that are in this frame, then kudos to you for getting the bottle and the whiskey glass to look pretty damn good. But the background doesn't have the same gravitas. It just doesn't pull me right through the image, because a photo like this, it's telling its message just fine in the foreground, but if it has to be set in a place, and the place is the background, it doesn't pull me all the way through to that point. It gets me halfway there.
Okay, so I'm not going to have a lot left to say on this one because they've kind of addressed everything, and I'm going to start with, the window, as it were, is a complete mismatch to me. And it's such a mismatch. Even I understand what you're saying about Berlin, and I've never been there, which may be part of the problem. I would have guessed this was Middle East somewhere based on the lower building on the left with the little turrets. And so there's immediately a disconnect because, like Chris, I pictured New York. So even though you're doing it in an homage to Berlin in your favorite book, if you're making a photo telling a story, it's either got to be clear or just tell a different story. Yeah, is really what it comes down to. I love your choice of props, right? The fact that you have some of the bullets not in the gun, 3 standing up, rule of odds, 1 laying down, right? I don't know that was intentional rule of odds, but I dig it either way. The problem that I'm having is, I would love to see, I don't believe it's a composite, by the way, because I don't think that you could, I don't think somebody could easily or would spend the time getting that reflection in the bottle. But I'd like to see the bottle label. I really would, rather, because what I'm seeing is the inside of the label on the back of the bottle. I'd rather you turn that, separate the glass a little bit, because right behind the glass is the cork for the whiskey. And I wish that was visible to me. Focus is also off to me. The focus to me needs to be on the text, and it's not. It's on the cover, the center cover of the book. So I would change that. It's also, there's an angle mismatch. So the buildings outside are level, but the table and the window frame are not. Maybe you're trying to build tension. Suppose that's possible. The other thing is, I don't like the reflection in the glass. I don't mind it in the bottle. I would probably want to take it out of the glass, but that's just me. I like the shadows. I like what you've done with that. Yeah, not bad. I want to go back to something that Terrell said, because I thought it was kind of funny. Terrell in the chat said, quote, intent, mood, concept. I just put that in my memory bank, which is so true. Those are 3 really great words I think everybody should remember. So with that in mind, I think we're done on that one. So let's go to the next one, unless somebody's got something else on this one. I
just want to say one more thing, because I think this brings up a good example of this, which I like to say to my students quite often. There's a challenge as a photographer where you are living an experience or you're creating an experience. You have that concept, you have that intent, and yet you also have to consider what the viewer is going to think. Like you talked about, Stephen, like we kind of picked up with those buildings, right, where we might be ignorant to the fact that this is a Berlin skyline, but what matters to the viewer is where does it take them first? And if you're trying to say a story cohesively and the viewer's being taken to the wrong place, that is a challenge that we have to deal with. So I always encourage people, when you're thinking about intent and when you think about content, try to remove yourself out of the scene as much as possible. Or, this is why it's positive to show other people or get these photos critiqued like we're doing right now, right, where you'll start to see what other people are going to internalize right away, and realize that, hey, even if I understand what's going on, does my viewer get that same story? Am I leading them down a path or just trying to give them directions and hope that they make it?
Yeah, I don't think that can be emphasized enough, that you can, look, if one of these shots is yours, you are more than welcome to sit on your side of the screen and say, you guys are idiots, man. That's clearly Berlin.
And we are sometimes.
People would, yeah, and we are sometimes. That's okay. You'll still, in my belief at least, it's amazing how often you will disagree with somebody doing a critique and think, you don't understand my art, right? But you'll still come away going, but isn't it interesting that somebody saw that in my image? I would have never imagined somebody will see that in my image. And that's what makes it worth it right there, right? Just doing that. Don, you're up on the last one before the break.
All right. Caught Up in the Music is the title of this one. And, the street photography is such an interesting thing because so many people have so many different takes on how it can be done. And so my opinions might not match yours. But the idea that I've always tried with this type of photography is to be as subtractive as possible, to narrow it down to the core ingredients of geometry, of human expression, of, sometimes black and white can work really well. This image might, the photographer might want to try and do a black and white conversion because there's some bits of color around the frame, like the old woman in the wheelchair on the left-hand side, and whoever is taking care of her. You've got more color there than in other parts of the frame, and so that can grab your attention. And I'm looking at a lot of the eyes in the image. Any eyes that you can see, they're looking probably at the musician, but from all of them that you can see, that's also in the same line of sight as the photographer. And so that almost makes it seem like they're looking at the photographer, even if they're not. But if they seem that way, then that's what my perception would be. And that kind of makes the photographer not just a silent party documenting something. They have the attention. And the attention should be, I think, on the musician. To me, this image, the entirety of this image using that subtractive art methodology is captured here. It's in the frame. It is the pianist, and enough of the piano to tell it's a piano, and the woman right in behind, smiling ear to ear, holding up her phone and documenting it. That tiny little piece, that's the photo here. That's the part that has the message that conveys the entire amount of emotion. And yes, that leaves out the dancer. But that's still the story to me. And the dancer, maybe you could frame that differently to get everything in an alignment, get further away with a telephoto lens, and don't look creepy using telephoto lenses taking pictures of people on the street.
Yeah.
But you can compress that in and maybe include them back in the composition in a different way. But I think that the rule of subtraction needs to be applied to an image like this.
So interesting. We agree. I think our direction might be different. I do think lens choice, this is photojournalism, let's be honest, right? And I love photojournalism. I love how people tell stories in real life. You've treated it gently, right? You didn't go in and boost the colors nuts or throw the clarity like nuts. She's blurry, it's okay. She's dancing, it's part of the story. It's kind of like taking a picture of a race car on a racetrack. If you shoot it too fast, then the wheels stop spinning and it looks like it's parked. I love the motion and story that you've got here. But lens choice to me matters, and I'd like to see more of this story, not less. So she's too close to the edge of the frame for me, and he's equidistant on the right. That's nice. You got him the same, but you've got half a person on the right, and I never like to see half of a person if I can avoid it. I would have liked to see actually a little bit wider. Show me the environmental part of this environmental portrait. Let me see what all the other people around are doing, because like Don said, with those eyes looking right at the camera, I feel like I'm standing there. They're looking at me, and that's great. I do wish I could read the chalk, and you're below her eye level. I mean, you're almost center frame is her waist level. So you're at the pianist's eye level. But I kind of would like to see this up at her eye level, slightly down, so that I could maybe read the chalk. Other than that, vertical lines are off. I would straighten your vertical lines on the buildings in the background, things like that. The only minor thing, and this is minor and it doesn't really matter, it's photojournalism, but in a perfect world, I wish that you had rotated a little bit more to the right so that I'm guessing those are tip buckets. The tip bucket on the left is freestanding. The one on the right intersects the piano. I wish that it didn't. Whether you move to the left,
start moving the tip buckets though.
Yeah, don't. Yeah, well, and yeah, that could get you hurt. But the other thing is, it's photojournalism. You don't get involved in the story. But if you move to the left, it would be between the legs and not intersect. If you move to the right, it would get free of that leg. Again, Chris said it earlier. You'd be shocked what 2 inches will do to an angle. What do you got, Chris?
I mean, I love street photography. This is one of my genres of photography that I enjoy pursuing. For me, the photographer, the story here, what they've chosen to frame, the music, the pianist, and then this woman dancing, to me, that's the story. And so I like the intent of that story. way too much going on though in the background. For me, actually, I would be tempted in a scenario like this. And as a street photographer, I love scenarios like this. You've got a static musician. You've got a person who really doesn't care that people are watching. I mean, this is gold, right? You're not waiting to get somebody in front of a billboard or hope to hell that, like, you know, the stars align for this perfect moment.
Right.
Here you've got the opportunity to shoot a few frames and really explore the space. My first inclination in this shot would be to go to the left. I want to see the person with the piano and I want to see her dancing and as little else as possible. And the great thing about that piano is it's huge. And even if it's out of focus, you're going to recognize its shape. You're going to understand what's going on, but she's the story. So I would actually move quite drastically to the left, maybe even go vertical frame or, you know, a tight crop. I want to see her dancing and then the piano behind her so that you make that connection. You would cut out a lot of those people sitting in the far left, hopefully get rid of some of the buildings. I'd get a little bit higher up for sure. You know, like you said, Steve, looks like the photographer's a little bit lower, stand up higher, but I want to see her face. I want to see that energy. It's a great moment that they've captured. That should be more in the frame. So I'm thinking her quite large, filling the frame left and piano on the right. That's what my instinct would say. Of course, I'm not in the situation. I don't know what we're going to find in the far right. Maybe like 3 food trucks, which would be intensely distracting. Exactly. Who knows? But, you know, black and white.
New York City police tape. Yeah.
Who knows, right? Black and white would be certainly a good choice because we're not losing any color. It's just going to simplify tones, and her dress is going to work well for that. It's already monochromatic. But yeah, you know, we've got good elements here. So once you see those elements, then the key is how do I strengthen that with the time that I have? And in a scene like this, you as a photographer should be running, jumping, leaping, down, up, you know, squat, get on your tippy toes and really explore that space.
Yeah. And you know what? After hearing all of this, really the takeaway on this image learning wise to me is I think they had the wrong subject. They're clearly at the height of and focusing on the piano player, and she's the subject.
She's the subject. Yeah.
And that's what caused the wrong height. That's what caused to me some of the incorrect frame. Incorrect's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Framing type stuff. So quick break. Then we got 4 more images to do after this. So I want to talk to Chris for a second because I have, like I said at the beginning, and I know Drake. We did your shot earlier, by the way. Drake is just joined in on the chat. If you missed the beginning, let me just say up front, because some of the stuff that we did at the beginning will be trimmed later too. The guest today is Chris Niccolls. Now, Chris is one of the co-hosts with Jordan Drake, who was on the Critique Show as a guest panelist 2 shows ago. But Chris is one of the co-hosts of DP Review TV. Don and I both, I'm speaking for Don, I shouldn't do that. Don and I both are fans of DP Review TV, partially because Don does stuff for DP Review TV.
And I need to do more. I am behind schedule on some of that stuff.
And here's the reason I bring it up, though. Because your humor, Don, fits in. Like when I watch Jordan and Drake, Jordan and Drake. Jordan
oh no! Don't start calling me Drake. Oh, that's his dream. That's what he wants.
Jordan Drake and Chris Niccolls. When I watch you guys on DP Review TV, you can do a camera review, or you can talk about something conceptually, you know, as far as a topic is concerned. And there's always a little bit of humor that brings it down to earth and makes it understandable to the average photographer that may be award-winning and yet doesn't ever read the manual and know how to use their gear. You guys communicate in that kind of a way. So for those that haven't seen DP Review, tell us what DP Review is and where people can find you.
You know, you bring up an interesting point, Steve. dpreview.com started out as, well, and it's still continuing as a very high-end journalistic website trying to do important articles, lots of very scientific lab work between cameras, you know, judging things like differences in componentry, quality of image, lens quality, right? I mean, they do that so well. And that's great. I think that's a very valuable thing, but there's a lot of photographers, myself included, that would go on to DP Review and just be like, wow, like this is technical. It's very interesting, but it's very, very in depth. And when they brought us in, Jordan and I, from the Camera Store TV, I think it was the intent of trying to bridge kind of 2 worlds, you know, have that technology, take what's important about the gear and what it can do for your workflow, what it can do for your creative output, but at the same time, make it a little bit more accessible, make it a little bit more entertaining, you know, get some humor in there. And so Jordan and I were really happy to be a part of that because we felt like this was going to be a really good fit for us. That's kind of what we tried to do at the Camera Store TV. So yeah, I encourage people to watch it, please. I'd really appreciate that. You know, it's a great way to get a good, simple overview of camera gear. And then you have the option to go to dpreview.com and really get in depth, look at cameras side by side. But we just want to kind of bring you into the world and give you a bit of a hug and then just kind of push you in the right direction to find out the gear that's right for you. And that's what Jordan and I, you know, have always strived to do.
Yeah, and again, the key to me is bringing it down to earth is just awesome. So Don, my friend, tell us about what you're doing. You know, touch on Inside the Lens, touch on your DP review stuff, and of course, Photo Geek Weekly.
So Photo Geek Weekly and Inside the Lens are podcasts that I do that I absolutely love. In fact, you know, Photo Geek Weekly is going to be coming up shortly here in just over an hour. And we're going to be doing that live on my YouTube channel. But that's just kind of the inquisitive nature of what I like to do photographically. I always ask a lot of what-if questions. And, well, we do that with news stories. Some other things I've been doing with DP Review TV. An episode I did recently where I was playing with fire, literally with very high temperature combustion to create a what I think is a fun image. It got like almost no views, and I'm kind of upset. Sometimes like things that you expect nobody's going to care about that. Oh wait, well 100,000 people saw that. Okay, well, and then something that you really like is it's been done before. But so the video thing is an ongoing challenge, and I've got 2 new ideas that I'm working on this week, including making artwork with ferrofluid and gallium, which will be some fun liquid metal experimentation, and another one where I'm hunting for micrometeorites. So those are the 2 coming up from there. So yeah, there's fun to be had, and I've got a macro photography book coming up very soon. I'm putting the final polishing touches on. I've paid the press for it, so we're going ahead. You know, it's just I got to finalize the files to their standards at this point, and that can be found at skycrystals.ca. Lots of irons in the fire right now. Well, the family's been home the entire year, so it's been tough to stay productive.
Yeah, once the world stops ending, this is all going to be great. I have to say before we get back into shots, the fire episode to me, I loved it. It was exactly the mad scientist Don Komarechka that I want to see. And folks, if you have not seen that, do Don a favor. Go give that video a thumbs up.
Now go in, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to DP Review TV at the same time, because those statistics look really good on me.
I always love doing the shows with Don.
And did you mention what we're doing next?
Yeah, Photo Geek Weekly coming up at 6 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing it live. And Steve, I put a link in the Zoom chat. If you want to just kind of copy and paste that in some way, or find my Twitter feed that has that within it.
I will.
Just get that into the chat for everybody here. So we'd love to have you come along for a second round.
I definitely will. Mm-hmm. All right, so that brings us back into the images. And for the first image, I'm going to go first on this one. And this one is actually called, simply enough, Triumph. Why? Because it's a Triumph motorcycle. And first of all, the subject, absolutely beautiful. Love the Springer seat. Love the fact that the Springer seat has tape on it. I mean, come on. It's mid-repair. They've got the engine opened up here where you can see the gearbox inside. I'm trying to think how I want to word this. Okay. This is the definition of a shot to me that when you'll hear some photographers, landscape photographers in particular, say always shoot, or videographers even, always shoot wide, mid, and tight. This to me is the definition of a shot that needs detail shots. And the reason is shooting this wide, and I understand what you're trying to do, getting the motorcycle, the garage behind it, etc. But the issue that I'm having, the big tarp on the right covering something like a trailer or some table, silver on the bottom, black on the top. On the left-hand side, you have a car, but then you have another tarp there that's super bright silver. None of that tells me anything. And in fact, if anything, is just distracting. If you could get it cropped in past the tarp on the right, and unfortunately, you can't really crop past the tarp on the left because of the angle you're shooting at. So I would either move straight and see if I could just get that motorcycle with the garage behind it. If that didn't work, This is the definition of detail. Walk up to this thing, shoot close. Get me a shot of nothing but the springs and the seat with the tape. Get me just the Triumph logo. Get me a shot of just that engine opened up, right? Do some detail shots on this, logos, stuff like that. But the main thing is just the car needs to not be there, really, is the big one. The other thing is there's some angle distortion. The bike is level. The car is level. The tarp on the right is level. There's no way that workbench is at a 10-degree angle. So there's some kind of lens distortion going on here that I would say needs to be addressed. Right, Chris?
Sure. For me, the big thing here, there's a couple things I want to say. First off, of course, the background is very poignant, but it's also very busy, right? I feel like we're losing quite a bit of bike against that in focus background. I want to get some of just that black garage. I think really the thing that needs to scream out here is we got to change our angle. We got to get in there. But what I love about this kind of situation, and I think Michael was saying, he saw this guy working on this great looking Triumph, right? Even with COVID and the way it is, and we got masks on and stuff, right? Like, this is the perfect opportunity to go talk to somebody. Photography goes beyond the technical standpoints and the lens choice and stuff to finding the right light and making the right opportunities. This is where I would go, and I would try to talk to that person, talk to them about their bike, get into obviously what they're passionate about. And you'll be surprised how often that person's gonna be like, after a conversation, yeah, like, move around, take a picture of my bike. You want to see this? I've got this might be cool. And that might give you more of that freedom to break that shyness, break that barrier, and really be able to move around the space without feeling like, this person's just like, why are they scoping out my garage and my bike, right? Like, what are they doing? So go talk to the person, take that opportunity. But yeah, maybe get a little bit lower, get a little bit closer. That's where I want to see it. Get some of that dark behind. The bike is beautiful. At least it's framed in between there. Like, it stands out as much as possible, given that we've got so much in focus in the background.
Yeah, I can't disagree with a lot of that, but I would say that the ideal version of this image for me, I wouldn't change the framing at all. I would want, and I know it's an impossible ask, but I would want the car on the left to be covered in a tarp. I'd want the gold Suzuki in behind to be covered in a tarp. Yeah. Because that is such a distraction. That gold Suzuki, the other motorcycle that's just right in behind, its handlebars and its gauges and stuff is directly intersecting with the Triumph bike that's in front of it. And so, yes, you can change your angle left and right, but if you, like Chris was saying, were to talk to this guy, he loves these things, obviously. Mm-hmm. If he's making a show of fixing them up, he's got tarps for him. He has to. I mean, why wouldn't he?
He's got a tarp for his car. That's a guarantee.
Yeah. So, just to say, okay, well, I'd love to stage this shot, to frame what you're doing. Can we be friendly? Can I get a shot that I'll send you a print of or something, and cover up that bike in the back? I don't mind the clutter of the paperwork and the cans. Like, that's just what you'd find in a garage, and it's non-material to pull me away from the subject matter. But cover more things up, leave the framing as you currently see it, and I think you've got a winner.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And by the way, Jane asked where the fire video is. DP review on YouTube. So if you've got a DP review, it's there. And then I just put in the chat the link to Don's live Photo Geek Weekly that's coming up at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern time today. And that, my friends, brings us up to the next image. And the next one is called Coming and Going. Chris, you want to start us?
I shall, yeah. The monochromatic treatment, I think, works here. I love the layers that we're getting, and it looks like we've got nice, even horizons. I mean, I'm a little bit more forgiving on angle and horizon, depending on the shot. And I'm okay with horizons being off. But I think, the key thing is, if you are going to have a horizon off, make sure it's off enough that it's obvious, or make sure it's dead straight. And I think we've got good symmetry here. So I love the layers that we're getting, from sky to bright grass to dark tarmac to lighter charcoal. That builds a nice feel, a beautiful mood, a nice sense of scale between the two vehicles. I like that they're both. I think that's kind of the intent with the title. I don't know, the composition's got a nice, pleasing feel to it. Everything feels very formal, very beautiful. I'd even maybe pump up the contrast, because the first thing I see here is this would make a beautiful lithographic shot, a classic kind of black and white treatment where you get strong blacks, deep shadows. And I mean, the cars are so beautiful, right? I mean, it's an iconic shape, muscular. I like the lighting that we're getting on that lead car. Like it does give it that rounded shape, but very clean, very simple, very clean. This is a good photo where we don't have a lot of distractions or anything that really doesn't belong. Yeah, strong.
Let's see, Don?
Yeah, so I like it. It looks like it's an infrared shot, but it's if that were true, it's taken with a Canon Rebel XT, which doesn't have live view or anything to properly compose in infrared, and infrared light focuses at a different point than visible light, and it looks like the focus has been nailed here. So if this is an infrared image, then kudos to you for doing it with that camera. But you know, it's interesting because you're at one.
And let me just interject. Kudos to you either way, because if it's not an infrared, you did a great infrared processing on it.
Sure.
Yeah, you made the black and white process with the greens boosted and the blues darkened, but it seems kind of more infrared-y because, if that's a word, because the clouds have more of a contrast to them than a classic process would have created. Now, what's curious to me though is the lead car at 1/1600th of a second shutter speed is nice and fairly crisp, but it does feel kind of static. You know, I think, Steve, you were mentioning earlier, you know, if you can get a little bit of motion in the wheels, then it would feel a little bit more dynamic. But simultaneously, the car in the background must be just booking it, because it's got motion blur on it. And so it's this weird thing where the car in front might actually be staying still. Like, it might actually not be moving anywhere, because if the one in behind with the parallax delta shows motion blur at this speed, how can the one in the front not? And that's just, once I see that, I can't unsee it with the image. And that's just the mad scientist in me just thinking, okay, it doesn't add up. Still, I like the framing, and I love the connection of the two vehicles going in opposite directions, maybe down by an inch or two, just to actually close the gap of the grass in between the two vehicles just a little bit more, to make a stronger connection, and possibly, especially if this front car is sitting still, you've got the functional ability to take a photograph with the behind car closer to the hood of the front car, which would, I think, make more of a yin and yang kind of connection, especially with their colors, in opposition to each other.
I would agree with that for sure.
Okay, so a couple of things. Everything they said. First of all, the infrared type effect that you got, great. Classic car is beautiful. I kind of want these myself. Love the tidal usage that you've got growing, and I love the focus point being that 28 is just popping. The whole side of the car is popping. The position of the front car in the scene has a number of hits that are awesome. It is equidistant between the tires that are sitting in the grass right in front of it and the left edge of the frame. So it is actually a frame within a frame there.
Hold on, Steve. Late breaking information. The car in the foreground is cut out.
Who told you that? Is it in the description?
No, I have just discovered it by looking at the image. Take a look at the front of the car, right below the front bumper.
You're killing me.
And all along the shadow on the entire bottom, all the way up to the rear bumper, there is a thin white line
down there
that should not be there.
Well, that could also be chromatic aberration.
No, not there, not in the shadows.
Accentuated,
not in dark on dark.
maybe in processing.
No, that's not going to be a part of the equation.
All right. Well, I'm going to go off the fact I didn't know that. That's just what I see in front of me. Although the other thing is, by the way, the shadow is kind of harsh, which does make you think it doesn't really fit the light in some ways. But, okay, even if you dropped it in equidistant between the two. I like the frame within a frame. The top of the front car is dead center in the grass between the two cars. Again, accidental or not, I do like it. The back car, I would argue that the reason that one would have motion blur and the other one wasn't, before you brought up this point, was that they were motion panning to take the shot this way, but the other car's going the other direction. So that would make sense that the camera is literally moving the opposite direction of the back car.
Which would have been spinning the wheels, and so that's not the case.
Yeah. Okay. But still, couple of things though. Even with your processing, some of the highlights, like in some of the clouds in the sky, are banding a little bit. So be careful of that. And for me, I don't need that much gravel. Cut half of that gravel out. Cut a little bit of the sky out. Make it more of a pano to give me a feel of left to right distance. Who went first on this one? Chris did, so we're good on that one. Okay. So that brings us to the next one, which is going to be Dawn. This is our next to the last image. And I put this one, I will say, I put this shot in this position on purpose because I want to hear what Dawn says.
Dawn, did you take this photo?
Yeah, this is Fairy Pool.
A penultimate image, if there ever was one. So I've taken a lot of images like this, so I believe that I'm qualified to comment on it. So a couple of key things here. The focus is ever so slightly off on the main part of the flower, and it's really hard to get a focus that's acceptable on an image like this. You're shooting with a 60mm macro lens, and you're only at f6.3. I would definitively move that to f10 or f11, and that gives you a little bit more play within that. I might even get a little bit further away at that same level and crop in, knowing that you can throw pixels away on just about any camera these days, and extend that depth of field in a single frame nicely. To me, there's 2 points of improvement. First of all, I love the fact that you've got like 3 droplets, the reflections and everything just coalesces so beautifully. The flower that you're choosing in the background looks like it might be a rose or a dahlia of some kind, and it's not in the right position the way that I'd like it to be. It either needs to be closer so that you can fill in the bottom. You can see the flower's reflection, which is, it appears to be halfway submerged in the water so that you get a half reflection on the top, or the top is the actual flower, the bottom is the reflection. But I've got these gray corners, and that kind of pulls me away from the mood that the rest of the frame is. Now, it's actually okay if they're gray, but what if they were blue? You know, an accent color in the frame. And that can be simply done with a piece of blue construction paper put in behind just to give that color difference, or fill the frame with that flower to remove it entirely, move it closer. Sometimes you can't do that, especially when moving the flower closer means that you're going to have it more in focus. And it's nice that it's soft like this. You don't want it to be as sharp as the foreground. You need that separation. And so the choice of flower in the background. I like Gerbera daisies, however you want to pronounce them, because they are big daisy-like flowers that usually have multiple colors. Sunflowers work as well. The bigger the flower, the better. Heck, even put a print in behind of that flower, printed larger than life, and it'll give you the same effect. And the only other thing that I want to mention, because I got to save you at least some things to talk about, is the lighting angle and the lighting position. The droplet on the right-hand side, you can see a fairly significant specular highlight.
And now I officially have got nothing.
Hey, you put me first, Steve. I don't know why you would do. You should save me for the end on this one.
You were nearing the end, and I'm thinking he's gonna leave that one out. Yes.
No. Well, okay. I'll mention it, but I'll let you guys find the solution to it. And then
No. You're up. Go.
Okay, I was going to say, then you could circle back to me and see if you got it right, or at least what I would think. So that looks like it's either a flash head or it's window light. It kind of has a rectangular shape to it, which you can kind of see in the very, very top light. But there's also a secondary light, which makes me think that this is window light plus a pot light on in the room that you're in. It seems like this is just whatever the ambient light is. And if you take an ultra bright LED flashlight, which, you know, it's $50 or less for something that's very passable for this kind of work, you can start shaping the light. And I have I don't even know where it is. I had it on my desk earlier.
It's sitting next to him. I just know it.
No, here's a Lytra torch. There it is. These things are great for this kind of photography because they make terrible catch lights, so diffuse it. Otherwise, you get a whole grid of dots. But they come with the little diffuser things on them anyhow. So. So get equipped with the proper lighting and play around with exactly where you want it to be in the frame. Sometimes, surprisingly enough, it can even be under the water because these Lytra torches are waterproof. And so there's lots of flexibility in play with how you light an image like this.
And by the way, you can get those Lytra torches from Platypod as well if you are
Oh yeah, I bought the whole
interested in
kit.
Platypod gear. They've got a sale going on right now. Chris, you want to go second?
Oh, sure. That's very gracious of you, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else can you add, right? I mean, the flower at the far left side of the frame, I kind of think we could get rid of that. It does draw my eye to that edge. I don't know how you guys feel about the other flower that's overlapping behind the main part that's in focus. I'd like to see that pushed a little bit to the right, because then we get this interesting symmetry, and then right away it kind of competes with that out of focus flower sort of 3 arrangement. I'd like to see that a little bit away from that. And I would brighten up the bottom part of the photo. I know it's not realistic. Reflections will always be lower exposure than the main scene, but this is a stylized photograph. I'd like to see that bottom exposure brought up a little bit, just to kind of give that symmetry of exposure as much as we have it in the composition. Steve?
Yeah. Okay. Hi. That's it. No. I've got a little bit. First of all, I want to emphasize what Chris just said, because that's one of the best things you'll ever hear. Reflections are almost always darker than what's above the water. So always keep that in mind. If you end up with one that's opposite, something went weird, you can use it to some effect, but generally you got to be aware of that. I'm going to just touch on, everybody touched on everything. I'm just going to touch on 2 quick things. First of all, yes, the flower behind the main subject flower, definitely too bright. That would be fixed. Melody, by the way, did chime in on the chat and said it was a small flashlight, handheld, and there may have been some window light as well, so that's good to know. But that back flower behind the other one, I don't like them intersecting. But that said, I don't mind the gray, by the way, in the corners, but I understand what Don's saying. That said, I want to touch on something I actually think was really, really well done here. I don't see this type of shot often with this type of front to back and vertical layering spacing, right? You've got the reflection not on the same plane as the first touching the water flower, not on the same plane as the subject flower, with other flowers behind it. And then you have the same thing going vertically. And I love that you did that and you thought about that kind of position. It just needs a little bit of tweaking on the lighting and the position of everything, including, as Don said, that flower in the back. But yeah, really, again, great kind of starting point for where you're going with this.
And this type of photography is so experimental. You could spend your entire day just building setups without even picking up the camera and not be happy with it, because you have to make a subject worth photographing before you photograph it. Melody, if your shutter speed was 1/5 of a second at f6.3, your flashlight is far, far too dim. So you need to up your game there. And because it's so dim, that's why the window light competes in the frame and is noticeable within those reflections.
Okay. So last image, and as you were first to go before, you are first to go on the last image as well. Mr. Chris, if you want to hit us up on Sky High.
So, the first thing that you do notice, you do get a lot of sky. Normally, I think a lot of people's impression, and it might still be here, is crop tighter, right? Put that cyclist up in the top left, more rule of thirds. That would always be a kind of starting point. But I'm going to kind of go against that. I really do like the large sky here. It's a bit of a different composition. We're still working with rule of thirds in the lower third corner. I love the row of people, and I like that there isn't really much of a break. I like that we've got that nice even row of people, just a little bit of ground. That's all you need. It really does make the rider stand out. The person caught it in a good position. I think everything looks like it's, nice focus. But I like that big sky. Why not? I think it shows a sense of scale. I like that everybody looks small here. Normally we want people to be really big and fill the frame. These are all basic lessons that teachers will tell you. Fill the frame, simple, rule of thirds, crop tighter. But I like this choice. I feel like it really draws the clouds in. And I think fortunately we got some nice clouds. What would I do? Maybe bump up the saturation a little bit, get those clouds to pop a little bit more. But all in all, I think compositionally, great moment, great capture, and good choices here.
So I'll go next on this one, and we'll have Don close us out. I love the subject matter. I've shot this numerous times, a lot of festivals that I shoot, concert festivals all day or all weekend festivals. They'll have the, monster team out there doing their jumps, and I love shooting this type of stuff. I don't agree. I don't like this much sky, but I understand, you're trying to tie the title into it. I'm not sure to me that saves this much of the sky. It doesn't tell me anything. But I love that you tried to save the sky. You exposed and you kept the sky and you kept the clouds, and they're not clipped. And I like that, except you did so at the expense of the real subject. And the subject is the guy on the motorcycle. And if you'd exposed for him, a lot of these guys, when they're upside down, they have beards that are hanging and gravity's pulling them down. And there's some great scenes that you can get from that if you had exposed, or if you had split the exposure in such a way that you could recover him without damaging the sky. I would almost rather see you blow out this guy to keep him and then take a plate and substitute it back in, or not at all. Chris said something on the people standing on the hill, and I want to add to it. I love the line of people unbroken, and I love that there's a dip in them, right? Because then it's not just straight. There's a little bit of visual, something intriguing in the line of people, in that it dips at the exact third. That was fantastic. I love that. Instead of that much sky, I have no concept or perception of how high he is. So I know he didn't jump from where the people are. They're on a hill. He jumped from below them. How high is he? I don't know. I'd like to know, so I'd rather the whole frame came down, but the sky above him, cut that in half and give me that much dirt behind him to give me perspective. Or these also work really great, just cropped in on the jumper, right? Just nothing but the jumper. I don't care how many pixels you've got left. I think that would be a really cool shot as well. Don?
I would take it in a slightly different direction. I mean, what if, and I wouldn't do exactly this, but you'll see how you can recreate it. What if you just circled the motorcyclist, acrobatic person, whatever word best describes him, and his vehicle, and use content-aware move and stick him at the top of the frame. Content-aware move him up. And that fills in that sky. And we don't have a frame of reference of how tall, how high up he is anyhow. Now, is that bending reality? Yes, I wouldn't do that. But what you
unless it's photojournalism, don't do that. Don't do that.
No. But what you could do to get exactly the same effect is just get closer to him. Because then your camera angle is going to be higher, and you'll have that separation, and photojournalism rules are maintained. But you would get the exact or very similar angular effect of him being higher in the sky, with a higher separation from the crowd. Now, again, shout out to somebody that's using an iPhone 6S to take this picture, which, yes. I mean, that means you're in the moment. And it also means you're very mobile. And I don't know how close you are, but those lenses are fairly wide, and so if you got any closer, you might be, getting dirt in your teeth. So there's a limitation to what you can do with that. I love the framing, and if it was a vertical shot with this guy higher in the frame, then it would just have all the more just, I don't know, the spaciousness. The negative space would be between the guy in the motorcycle and the people, and I think that's where the space needs to be to make it powerful.
I agree, and I will say for the iPhone shooters in the crowd, you're going to be limited if you're using the built-in iPhone, photo app, camera app. So go get something like Halide or something like that, where you've got manual controls that you can set to an extent. You're not going to change the aperture, but where you've got the ability to shoot RAW. Hopefully the Apple Pro RAW that comes out soon will be an interesting way that you can shoot as well. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. And that, believe it or not, wraps it up. Interesting thing Jane said, she liked the way that the motorcycle, actually, let me bring that image back up. She liked the way that the motorcycle was moving up the streak of cloud. And that is an interesting point. It does look like they're driving up that streak of cloud, which is kind of cool. So with that in mind, Chris, where can people find you online? Instagram, Twitter? I think you're active on both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Instagram is like my chief thing, so please go there. It's at chris.niccolls. But again, it's the weirdest way to spell the last name Niccolls. There's no H's. It's Niccolls. You'll find me on there. And please, Deep Your Review TV. Just YouTube, Deep Your Review. Check out Don's videos. I mean, what I love about Don's videos, we've done a few with him. It's always such a fascinating experience, but also given the situation that we're in right now, these are perfect projects that you can do at home, whether it's COVID that's keeping you in, or the fact that where I live here in Calgary, Alberta, it's like going to become freezing cold very soon, and you're just not going to go outside. So check those out. That would be great. I really appreciate if you guys can visit those places.
And then on Twitter, it's Chris Niccolls _ I think. Yes,
Chris Niccolls _. Again, so the fact is, there's only one person with that spelling of the last name. You'll find me.
Okay, there you go. Niccolls.
Yes,
right?
Thank you.
All right. And Don, tell everybody where they can find you.
Doncom.ca, DONKOM.ca. Everything is linked to from there. And Photo Geek Weekly, I will reiterate, is coming up next. And I believe Steve put a link to that in the chat at the top of the hour, which is about 40 minutes away. So if anybody is not worn down by our commentary on photography, then get ready for some industry news and some fun technology discussions coming up.
Yeah. And can I just say,
Don's got 5. Oh, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Can I just say, I want to thank the people who actually put their photos up for critique, because I know that takes a lot. And in my line of work, I'm putting up sample galleries every 2 weeks. Half of those photos are crap. I get it. And it's just because, you're putting yourself out there. I know what it's like. It can be scathing. So hopefully you guys found this constructive. And I really appreciate you, giving us the opportunity to do that. It's a big deal.
Yeah. And took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you to everybody for playing in the pool, right? We're all just here to get better. We all just want to keep learning. Everybody is continuing to learn. And, playing and joining in with your pictures, Melody's in the chat, and Drake's in the chat, and who else was in the chat? David's in the chat. We did 3 of those people's pictures, so that's great. I appreciate everybody coming by. If you want to find Photo Geek Weekly, first of all, you should subscribe to it in your podcast app, right? If you're not subscribed to Photo Geek Weekly, you should be. And if you want to find the link, though, because we are going to stream live coming up at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern time, the day that this was released. So if you watch this after the fact, you can kind of ignore this part. But I will be tweeting the link. Don, it's at Doncom, so DONKOM on Twitter. He'll be tweeting the link out too, and you can find the link to go watch that live. If you want to join in on this, like the people who have for today, make sure that you head over to Flickr, sign up for an account for your paid, join the Behind the Shot group, and then start submitting your images. And if you want them available for us to choose to critique them on the critique shows, make sure that you also tag them with btscritique, all one word, and that's a Flickr tag, not a hashtag, and that'll get you in the pool for that. We're doing critique shows, probably about 1 a month. Again, as always, thank you to my guests. I really appreciate, Chris, you coming by and doing this. We went long today, and I just had too much fun. Don, it's always good to see you, and I will see you shortly too.
All right, thank you, Steve. You bring us all together for this, and I'm glad that it's timeless content.
Yeah, and it is. You can, and by the way, one thing I do want to add also is, if you're a landscape photographer, you can learn from people who shoot portraits. And if you're a portrait photographer, you can learn from people who shoot landscapes or concerts or whatever. Composition rules and other things you can always learn from. So that does it for this critique show. Thanks to everybody for participating. Thanks to everybody for stopping by and watching live or after the fact. If you want to watch the normal podcast, Behind the Shot, that's at behindtheshot.tv. You can subscribe to either a video feed or an audio feed in your podcast application, assuming that your podcast application supports video. Otherwise, the videos are here on YouTube. We will see you on the next show.